The boundary between good and evil. The boundary between good and evil is not well understood, because in Babylon, there is no boundary. What so few understand that if good and evil are two distinct realities, then good and evil will have two totally different conceptions of good and evil. This is only confusing and problematical in the evil scheme of things. It pays evil to dispute every claim good makes. The most fundamental claim that good makes is that there is a deep and unbridgeable chasm between good and evil. There is no crossing this boundary. There is no commerce between them. The distinction cannot be negotiated away, and there is no reconciliation between the two realities. For good and evil are two totally different realities with two kinds of people. The two groups are two races. Evil disputes this. Evil makes two possible claims. Evil claims there are several races based on physical features, such as skin color, or there is only one race, and biological differences are irrelevant. Both claims are made and have value depending on how different a group needs to be considered a different race. Even if we take the proposition there are several races of persons, the distinctions are minor and not tied to anything fundamental. The differences between physical genomes are minor when talking about humans. It might be considered important to a dog breed to have a different set of markings and facial structures, but for humans, whatever the physical features, they are hardly important when it comes to our human identity. But this again is where evil and good separate. Evil has no way to separate one group from another other than on people's physical variations. In the evil reality, everything is physical. An alien is known by the features that do not look human. But what happens if a serious genetic accident occurs, and a person is born looking nothing like other humans? What if a Yeti is found, and it acts and speaks as all humans act and speaks, yet looks identical to an ape? For those who embrace evil, everything is physical, and all physical differences are, to some degree, relative. This leaves those, who have a liberal mind, with an incoherent understanding of what good and evil are. Despite claiming they are opposite concepts, good and evil in the liberal conception, are divided by a continuum of graduated difference. There is no line between them. Infinitely transforms into infinite bad, but this view is moderated by liberals claiming an actual pure good is not possible, therefore, a pure evil is not possible either. This manner of thinking about the problem makes it impossible for liberals to understand God. If God is infinitely good, then for an atheist, Satan must be an equal and opposite power. Yet, this does not make sense. If good and evil are not only opposite, but equal, what does it even mean to be good? What is good if it has no greater power than evil? So, liberals, as the way humans manifest evil, do not understand what it is they manifest. They cannot comprehend the idea of a boundary between good and evil, let alone conceptualize this boundary. This is not academic nitpicking. If there is no line between good and evil and a division in the most fundamental of senses, there is no good and evil. If there is no inherent division between good and evil, the Bible is wrong, and God does not exist. These things might be discounted. The issues surrounding good and evil will seem unimportant to many. If God does not exist, or if good and evil are not absolutes, then we have liberalism, and we have liberalism anyway. But they have not considered the implications of the liberal position. If good and evil do not exist, then phenomenology is the only alternative left, which means life is absurd, as the phenomenologist said, for it lacks meaning and indeed, lacks the possibility of having meaning. If there is no right and wrong, there is no direction, progress or objectivity. Many of us have been taught that objectivity is solely concerned with quantification. A thing with a larger numerical value is indeed larger than something with a lower value. But that has nothing to do with good and evil. But which is better, the larger or the smaller, is the question? Without a moral compass based on an objective right and wrong, there is no objectivity. Being bigger or smaller, faster or slower is meaningless, unless we can say which is better and which is worse. We can say Joe has killed more men than Sam, but is this a good thing or a bad thing? Without having a moral compass to determine the morality of the deaths, we cannot say we are objective about the killings. In this world, we cannot objectively determine if an abortion is good or evil. One path might be than another, but if we do not know where we are going, what difference does it make? Are we truly being objective, if one response means Earth will continue to exist and another means Earth will be destroyed in a nuclear holocaust, but we have no opinion on which action we ought to take? Even those who claim there is no objective good and evil, act as if there is. Otherwise, they could not make choices. There has to be a sense of good and evil, or we could not prioritize our choices and the path we take. We act as if it is a good thing to be kind to others. We act as if following the law is a good thing. We probably act as if being alive is a preferred condition to being dead or injured. But this is not an objective conclusion, if there are no right answers to life's biggest questions. But what is more, if there is no good and evil, there would be no good in not doing evil. There could be no preference. There could not even be life, because if we had life we would have it as an active preference. This would mean we think life is a preferred state to death. This brings us to an observation. What is good does not mean free. It is easy to die. We just need to stop working to stay alive. So even in this observation we learn there is a good and evil in the sense that doing good is active and requires intention. Doing evil simply requires an action or an action without intent. How often do we hear people commit harm and claim they never intended to do evil, but that is the point. They did not intend to do good. They just did not care what the outcome was. There was no true intention coupled with what they did. One does not do good by accident. Doing good takes intentionally and it takes sentience. There must be a sense of what has value and the intent to create value. If we truly do not think there is good and evil, we will lose all sense of moral direction. As we said, it takes work to do good, and the greater the good one does, the more work it takes. If we do not have a clear sense of what is good and what is evil, our work will not have the focus needed to make a difference. But, so far, the discussion has been very general. This suggests that without a way to objectively measure the value one creates, one is not likely to do much that is fundamentally good. Indeed, it is plausible that the difference between a civilized nation and a primitive one is that the civilized nation the amount of good one does, and the primitive nation has less insight into the nature of good and evil. Therefore, the difference between a developed nation and less developed one is the level of morality found in each one. Developed nations are predicted to be more moral than the less developed, but that this rule will not hold for individuals, as there are too many ways for individuals to get rich without being moral. The pivotal point is the accuracy of the accounting. Stealing is nothing more than bad accounting. In itself it is a minor inconvenience. Even the most prolific thief does little to a developed economy. Most thefts do not even seriously impact a business or individual. Yet, stealing is wrong and a crime. Yet, most people look at stealing as little more than a moral lapse, to be condemned but not something that ought to ruin a person's life or reputation. So many Westerners take a very liberal approach when dealing with those who steal. What is a theft but an economic transfer? A credit in column A is transferred to column B but without a corresponding debit to balance the accounts. It is a minor problem when considered in the abstract and in isolation. But eliminate accounting altogether, and what have we? Without accounting, we do not have accountability. Most persons think of this as benefiting evil, which it does. We fight against this lack of accountability by imposing costs onto criminals and those who try and avoid accountability. In so doing, we are distracted from the more important point. Without accountability we are unable to live the good life. Indeed, we are at a loss to even know what this means. But God created reality and declared it good. Now, it is true Adam sinned and was kicked out of the garden, but was he kicked out of the reality God had established, the good world? The answer to this is yes, because sin and death had entered into the world through the sin of Adam. What is more, Adam and his heirs are blocked from finding and entering Eden. That is because Eden is not a physical local conceptual. Eden is a utopian vision or conception. We cannot be in Eden because Eden is a life without sin. That does not mean we cannot approximate Eden. It does not mean we have to keep walking further and further from Eden. We can use Eden as a template on which to build the good life. To do this we need to understand accountability, and this means we need to comprehend the boundary between good and evil, because if there is no boundary there is no accountability and no path to Eden. Eden was in fact an accountability mediated directly by God. Eating of the tree was a shift in accountability. What was mediated directly by God, changed into man taking control of his own morality. This is still continuing on the left. The right struggles to find that moral culpability created by God. But we try to do it within the Babylonian system. Apologetics is not just an intellectual exercise, it is a new society. Apologetics shifts the center of our morality from man and his emotions to the church, which represents God on earth. We lost that direct connection to God, but He provided us the church, as a stopgap alternative. The boundary on this earth, in God's reality, is the church. Good builds the church and evil erodes it. It is that simple. But what is the church? We know it is not buildings and memberships. But it is not divorced from these things either. The church is the value the church has to us. Think of the church as a holding company, operating for the benefit of the shareholders. It is that simple. Build the church and the church, as believers, benefits. This takes us back to the problem of accounting and the issue of accountability. The church holds us to account. The church makes us accountable for the costs we create. The church makes us accountable because in the church we pay the costs we create. Obviously, the church must be represented by an account, or ledger. The church is a holding company or trust, holds the accounts of its members. Accounts require a unit of account to enable debits and credits to be tracked. A unit of account has no value. It is simply a way to digitalize values, in the interests of bookkeeping. If we create value, and therefore add debits to our account, we are building the church. The more active members the church has, more the church is built. If in the red, then something is going wrong. This is where the church holds members accountable, as per Matthew 18:15-20. The objective of justice is to repair the rift between buyer and seller, by erasing the debt and bringing the sinner to repentance. We repent of the debt by canceling the debt. The church puts the repentant sinner onto a path of productivity, where they become an active builder of the church. Therefore, the boundary between good and evil is the line that divides those who actively build the church, through acts of faith that add value to the body of Christ, and those who freeload and become a burden to the church. Needless to say, of all the freeloaders that exist, the state is the biggest of them, and the largest cause of freeloading in others. The church cannot be built without an economy that permits it to separate from the state. We cannot build the church and build the state. They are incompatible. The line between good and evil passes right between church and state.